seemed perfect, but behind her smile was a secret that would shatter everything I believed about us. Part 1. The perfect beginning and the cracks beneath the surface. From the moment I met Emma, I thought I had found someone truly special. She was vibrant, full of life, and had a laugh that could light up the darkest room. Every time she smiled, I felt like the luckiest guy alive. Our connection was instant, effortless conversations, shared dreams, and an excitement that made my heart race. We moved fast, but it never felt rushed. There was a natural flow to our relationship, a feeling that this was how things were meant to be. Friends and family loved her, and I was proud to have her by my side. For the first time in years, I let myself believe in us, a future filled with love and happiness. But as the months passed, little things began to feel off. At first, it was subtle. Missed calls, vague answers when I asked where she'd been, a sudden coldness that I couldn't explain. Emma was still the same person on the surface, but something underneath was shifting. I tried to ignore it, blaming stress at work or her own worries. I told myself that I was overthinking, that love meant trusting even when it was hard. But deep down, a gnawing feeling of unease began to grow. One evening, I came home early from work hoping to surprise her. The apartment was dark and her phone lit up on the kitchen counter. Curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced at the screen. Messages from a man I didn't know, filled with affectionate words, flirtatious emojis, and plans to meet. My heart stopped. I didn't want to believe what I saw, but the truth was undeniable. Emma was hiding something from me. Someone else. Confronting her was the hardest thing I've ever done. The look in her eyes when I asked her to explain was a mix of guilt, fear, and defiance. She told me it wasn't what it seemed, that it was complicated, but the damage was done. Trust shattered in an instant. The weeks that followed were a blur of pain, confusion, and endless questions. How could someone so perfect lie so completely? Was I just a fool blinded by love? I found myself spiraling, doubting everything about the relationship, and worse, doubting myself. But amid the heartbreak, I knew I had a choice: let this betrayal define me, or find a way to heal and move forward. This is the story of that choice, of discovering strength I never knew I had, facing the truth no matter how painful, and learning that sometimes the hardest endings lead to the strongest beginnings. Part 2. The unraveling. When secrets begin to surface. In the days after that discovery, my world felt like it was crumbling beneath me. The apartment, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and suffocating. I kept replaying the messages in my mind, trying to understand how Emma could hide something so significant from me. The man's name was unfamiliar, but the tone of their conversations left no room for innocent explanations. I wanted answers, but every attempt to talk with Emma felt like walking on a tightrope. One wrong word and everything might collapse. At first, she avoided the subject, brushing off my questions with vague reassurances. "It's complicated," she said, eyes darting away, voice tense. But I could see the cracks forming in her facade. I remember one night, when I sat across from her in that dimly lit cafe, the place where we first met. I asked her straight, "Who is he? What's going on?" Her hands trembled as she stirred her coffee, and finally, she sighed. "There's a lot you don't know," she said quietly. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I made mistakes, and I'm trying to fix them." Her confession wasn't a relief. It was like a punch to the gut. The more she spoke, the more tangled the story became. She talked about a past she never shared, a relationship that had ended badly, someone she hadn't fully cut ties with. She said she was confused, caught between old feelings and new commitments. I wanted to believe her desperately. But the trust that once felt unbreakable was now a fragile thread, threatening to snap with every doubt. Days turned into restless nights filled with endless questions. Why didn't she tell me sooner? Why hide it at all? I was haunted by thoughts of betrayal, wondering if everything we had built was built on lies. At work, I found it hard to concentrate. My colleagues noticed my distracted mood, but I couldn't bring myself to talk about what was happening. Even my closest friends were left in the dark because I didn't want to seem weak or embarrassed. Emma and I tried to keep things together, but the distance grew between us like a widening canyon. She seemed torn, caught between guilt and fear of losing me. I felt angry, hurt, and lost all at once. One night, I stayed up late scrolling through our old photos, trying to find a moment when everything felt real. Before the cracks appeared, there was a picture of us laughing on a beach, sun setting behind us, faces glowing with happiness. I wondered if that version of us was just a beautiful lie. I realized that love, no matter how strong, can be fragile. It requires honesty, openness, and trust, things that, once broken, are hard to repair. Despite everything, a part of me still hoped for a way back. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. Forgiveness was something I needed to find inside myself before I could even think about forgiving her. So I made a decision to face the pain head-on, to confront the truth no matter how difficult. Because if this relationship was going to survive, it would have to be rebuilt from a place of honesty. No more secrets, no more lies. And if it couldn't, then I needed to find the strength to let go and start over. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I was determined to walk it with my eyes wide open. Part 3. The Breaking Point. When Love Meets Its Darkest Hour. The weeks that followed our conversation felt like living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Each morning, I forced myself out of bed, but the weight of Emma's secret pressed down on me like an invisible chain. I was caught between two painful truths. The woman I loved was hiding pieces of herself, and the man I had trusted was struggling to hold himself together. We tried to keep a semblance of normalcy. Emma would show up at my apartment with that familiar smile, but behind it was a flicker of guilt and sadness that I couldn't ignore. We'd watch movies, go out for dinner, but the air was always thick with unspoken tension. Conversations turned cautious, careful. I was constantly alert for signs, a hesitation, a glance away, a message buzzing on her phone. One night, after a quiet dinner, I found myself unable to hold it in any longer. The silence between us was suffocating. "Emma," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know everything. No more lies, no more half-truths." She looked at me, tears welling up, and finally broke down. The story she told was raw and painful. She revealed a side of her life I had never seen, a past filled with mistakes, regrets, and a man who had tangled her in a web of emotional manipulation. "I thought I was done with him," she said, voice trembling. "But he didn't let me go. I tried to protect you from all of it, thinking it was better if you didn't know. But it wasn't." I listened, torn between anger and sympathy. The woman I loved was trapped in a past she couldn't fully escape. The betrayal wasn't just about secrecy, it was about the invisible chains that still bound her. That night, I lay awake, grappling with a storm of emotions. How could love survive when shadows from the past refused to fade? How could trust be rebuilt when the foundation was shaken? I wanted to believe in us, but my heart was breaking. Then came the moment I feared most. The phone rang late at night, an unknown number. Emma answered with hesitation, then froze. I could see the fear in her eyes. The man from her past was calling again. I demanded to know everything, and she confessed she'd been talking to him in secret, trying to set boundaries but feeling trapped. The next days were unbearable. I wrestled with jealousy, doubt, and heartbreak. The man's presence was like poison in our relationship, infecting everything with suspicion. I reached my breaking point when I found more messages, not just from him, but from others she had hidden from me. Each discovery was a fresh wound, reopening the hurt I thought was healing. I confronted Emma one last time, tears streaming down my face. Why did you keep lying? How am I supposed to believe in us after all this?" She looked at me with raw honesty. "I was scared of losing you, scared of facing the truth myself. I made mistakes. I hurt you, and I'm sorry, but I want to fight for us if you'll let me." Her words felt like a lifeline, but I didn't know if I could grasp it. Could I forgive such deep betrayal? Could I trust again after so many broken promises? The next days were a blur of reflection. I spoke to friends, sought advice, and even considered counseling. I realized that the decision to stay or leave wasn't just about Emma. It was about my own healing, self-respect, and whether I could reclaim my peace. Through the pain, I found clarity. Love wasn't simple or perfect. It was messy, complicated, and sometimes heart-wrenching. But it was also about growth, forgiveness, and the courage to rebuild. So I made a choice, not for her, but for me. I would fight for my heart, set boundaries, and demand honesty. If she was truly committed to change, I would stand with her. If not, I had to be strong enough to walk away. That night, as I lay awake, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. The road ahead would be hard, but it was the only path worth taking, toward truth, healing, and maybe, just maybe, a new beginning. Part 4. The Reckoning, Facing the Truth Together. The days that followed my decision to fight for us were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. Emma and I both knew that nothing could simply snap back to how it was before. We were standing on fragile ground, trying to rebuild a foundation shattered by secrets and lies. Every step forward felt like walking on shards of glass. We agreed to be brutally honest with each other. No more hiding, no more half-truths. It was terrifying for both of us. For Emma, it meant opening wounds she had kept buried for years. For me, it meant confronting fears I never wanted to acknowledge. Fear of betrayal, fear of being broken beyond repair, fear of losing the woman I loved. We started going to therapy together. At first, sitting across from a stranger and exposing the rawest parts of our relationship felt humiliating, but slowly, the sessions became a space where we could speak freely, where pain was acknowledged instead of pushed aside. Emma talked about the man from her past, how he had manipulated her, played on her insecurities, and made her doubt herself. She confessed how scared she was that he would come back to ruin what we had. Hearing her vulnerability shifted something inside me. I realized that behind her betrayal was a deep fear, and that fear had trapped her just as much as it had hurt me. At the same time, I shared my own pain, how abandoned and broken I felt when I found out about the lies, how angry I was that she hadn't trusted me enough to be honest from the start. It was the first time we truly saw each other's wounds, and for the first time in months, the distance between us felt a little smaller. Outside therapy, we worked hard on rebuilding trust. It wasn't easy. Every time Emma's phone buzzed, I felt a pang of anxiety. Every time she mentioned the man, old insecurities flared up. But we kept talking, sometimes for hours, until the rawness turned into understanding. One evening, Emma suggested we take a trip, somewhere far from the city and the reminders of our past mistakes. I agreed, hoping that distance and time might help us heal. We drove for hours, the silence between us comfortable rather than tense. Arriving at a small cabin by a lake, surrounded by trees and the quiet hum of nature, felt like stepping into a different world, away from screens, distractions, and past mistakes. That weekend was a turning point. Without the noise of everyday life, we faced each other honestly. We shared fears, hopes, dreams, and regrets. I saw Emma's eyes clear of the shadows that had haunted her for so long. She showed me her true self, fragile but determined, scarred but hopeful. We laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. We cried together too, releasing the pain we'd carried alone for months. As the sun set over the lake on that last evening, Emma took my hand and whispered, "I don't know what the future holds, but I want us to try, for real this time." I squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth and sincerity in her words. The road ahead was uncertain, and the scars would never fully disappear. But for the first time, I believed in the possibility of healing, not because everything was perfect, but because we were willing to face the truth together. The fight to reclaim our love had only just begun, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to fight, not alone, but with her. Part 5. The Struggle to Trust Again, Shadows in the Light. Returning from the cabin, reality hit hard. The quiet moments and heartfelt conversations were a beautiful break, but life wasn't waiting for us to heal at its own pace. The past was still lurking, threatening to pull us back into old patterns, and the future felt fragile, balanced on the edge of hope and fear. The first days back were filled with cautious optimism. Emma and I promised each other transparency, but old habits die hard. She was still hesitant to share every detail, a message, a call, a fleeting thought, and I found myself watching her like a hawk, my mind spiraling into worst-case scenarios. It was exhausting, but I couldn't stop. I wanted to believe she was committed to us, but every shadow in her behavior made me doubt. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home early, hoping to surprise her with dinner. Instead, I found her tense and distant, her phone buzzing repeatedly. I tried to brush off the feeling creeping in my gut, but when she locked the screen the moment I entered, something inside me snapped. "Emma," I said, voice shaking, "I can't keep pretending I'm not afraid. I need to know. Who are you really talking to? What are you hiding?" She looked up, startled, and tears welled up instantly. "I'm not hiding anything," she whispered. "Please believe me." But I couldn't, not after everything. The trust was shattered, and every doubt felt like a crack in my soul. That night, sleep eluded me. My mind replayed every conversation, every lie, every moment of silence that now seemed loaded with secrets. I questioned everything about us, about her love, about my own judgment. I tried to focus on my work, on friends, on anything to distract myself, but the poison of doubt spread. Emma noticed my withdrawal and tried to reach out, but I pushed her away. The walls between us grew higher and harder to scale. Weeks turned into months, and the fight to trust again became a daily battle. We had good days, moments of laughter, tenderness, and connection, but they were always shadowed by the fear that it could all fall apart again. I began to see the toll it took on Emma. She became anxious, afraid to make mistakes, to say the wrong thing. The weight of her guilt was crushing her, and I realized that the burden of forgiveness was heavier than I'd imagined. One afternoon, we had a long talk. I laid out everything I was feeling, the fear, the anger, the hope. Emma listened, tears streaming down her face, and said, "I want to earn your trust back, but I don't know if I'm strong enough to carry this guilt every day." Her honesty broke something open in me. I saw her not as a villain, but as a flawed, hurting person trying to find her way back. We agreed to keep working on us, with patience and understanding. I committed to letting go of some of the anger, and she promised to keep opening up no matter how hard it was, but the scars remained, reminders of a love tested by fire, struggling to survive. That's when the past decided to make its final move. One day, as I was leaving work, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was cold and deliberate. It was him, the man Emma had tried to leave behind. He warned me to stay away, but also hinted that he knew secrets that could destroy everything Emma and I had fought to rebuild. My heart raced. I knew then that the fight wasn't just between Emma and me, it was against the shadows of her past that refused to let go. I told Emma immediately. We were scared, but united. We had to face this together, or lose everything. The real test was just beginning. Part 6, When the Past Returns, Battling Ghosts Together. The moment I heard that voice on the phone, cold and deliberate, a storm erupted inside me, a mix of rage, fear, and helplessness. The man from Emma's past wasn't just a memory anymore. He was a looming threat, a dark shadow creeping into the fragile space we'd been trying to build between us. I sat down, heart pounding, trying to steady my voice as I told Emma. Her face paled, and I saw the flicker of terror that hadn't left her eyes since the day I confronted her about the affair. But this time, it wasn't just about our broken trust anymore. It was about something bigger, something dangerous. We had to act fast. No more secrets, no more hiding. We agreed to be allies in this battle, no matter how painful or difficult it got. For days, Emma was restless. She started checking every message, every call, looking for any sign that he might be near or trying to reach her again. I watched her anxiety grow, and my heart broke for the woman I loved, strong yet so vulnerable. We contacted the police, filed a report about the harassment. The officers listened, but the cold reality was that until something concrete happened, there was little they could do. Meanwhile, I became her protector. Every night, I stayed awake, listening for sounds outside, scanning every shadow in our home. I refused to let fear win. But living under this cloud wasn't easy. The tensions seeped into our daily lives. Every phone call, every knock at the door sent us both on edge. Emma stopped going out alone, stopped answering unknown numbers. I tried to reassure her, but the anxiety was contagious. One evening, as we sat together trying to eat dinner, the doorbell rang. Emma froze. I got up slowly, heart racing, and peered through the peephole. No one was there, but taped to the doorframe was a folded note. My hands trembled as I opened it. The message was short, cruel, a reminder that he was watching, waiting, and ready to destroy everything. That night, we didn't sleep. We talked for hours, the weight of fear and hope mingling in the quiet darkness. Emma told me more about him, about the years of manipulation, the lies, the control he tried to exert. She explained how she'd thought leaving him was the end, only to find his grip stretching longer than she ever imagined. I felt anger boil inside me, not just at him, but at the unfairness of it all. Emma deserved a fresh start, a chance at happiness. Instead, she was haunted by a past she couldn't outrun. But I also saw her strength, the courage it took to face those ghosts again, to stand with me and fight. We began taking practical steps, changed our locks, installed security cameras, made plans for emergency contacts and safe places. Yet, even as we prepared for the worst, we leaned on each other more than ever. The fear was real, but so was our commitment. We talked about our future, about what kind of life we wanted if we survived this. For the first time in months, the future felt possible. Still, every shadow, every whisper of the past was a test. One night, as I walked Emma to her car after work, a car slowed beside us. The tinted windows obscured the driver's face, but I recognized the menace in the way the vehicle lingered. My heart pounded. I grabbed Emma's hand tightly and pulled her back inside. "We can't keep living like this," she said, voice trembling, "but I'm scared to leave you." I looked at her, my own fear mingling with resolve. "We're stronger together. We'll face this, whatever it takes." That night, we made a pact. No more running, no more hiding. We would confront this darkness head on. But deep inside, I knew the fight ahead would push us to the edge. The past was not done with us, and neither was the test of our love. We were standing at the edge of a storm, but this time, we were ready to face the thunder, side by side. Part 7, Standing on the Edge. The Breaking Point. The weeks that followed felt like living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every shadow seemed to carry a threat, every unfamiliar sound a warning. The constant pressure tested everything we had fought for, our fragile trust, our tentative peace, our hope for a future. Emma and I had become a team forged in fire. We took every precaution, every step to protect ourselves. Cameras watched our home, friends checked in regularly, and I never let her walk alone after dark. Yet, none of that eased the gnawing anxiety. One night, after a long day filled with empty promises from the police and fruitless leads, Emma sat curled on the couch, staring blankly at the muted TV. The silence between us was thick with unspoken fears. I reached out to her, trying to offer comfort, but even my touch seemed inadequate. "I'm scared, Mark," she whispered. "What if he doesn't stop? What if this is just the beginning?" I swallowed the lump in my throat, realizing that despite my attempts to be strong for her, I too was terrified. The man we were up against wasn't just a ghost from the past. He was a real, dangerous presence, capable of ruining everything. Days later, that danger became all too real. Emma called me at work, her voice shaking. "Mark, he's outside. I saw him." My heart dropped and I rushed home faster than I ever had before. When I got there, the street was empty, but the fear in Emma's eyes was unmistakable. We checked the security footage. A shadowy figure pacing near our gate, lingering too long. It was him. The police promised to increase patrols, but their words felt hollow. They couldn't be everywhere, and neither could we. The strain began to show. Emma's laughter became rare, replaced by quiet moments of tension. I found myself walking on eggshells, afraid to trigger more fear. One night, after locking all the doors and windows, I sat with Emma on the porch, the cool night air heavy with unsaid thoughts. "We can't live like prisoners," I said quietly. "I know," she replied. "But how do we fight something we can't see? Something that haunts every corner?" Her words cut deep. The man from her past had become a phantom looming over our every move, a reminder that some scars run deeper than wounds. Despite the terror, something else was happening. Our relationship, battered and bruised, was healing in unexpected ways. The danger forced us to be honest, to communicate with a rawness that had been missing. We talked about everything, our fears, our failures, our dreams. The wounds of betrayal were still there, but so was a growing respect for the courage it took to face this nightmare together. One evening, Emma confessed, "I don't know if I can ever forget what happened, but maybe I can learn to live with it. If I have you by my side." I squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of those words. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real. Then came the breaking point. A few nights later, a loud crash shattered the fragile peace. The back door had been forced open. I grabbed the baseball bat from the closet and moved toward the noise, heart hammering. Emma was behind me, clutching my arm. The intruder was inside, a shadow moving quickly, intent clear in every step. "Get out!" I shouted, voice trembling but firm. He turned, the man who had haunted Emma's past, now a terrifying presence in our home. The confrontation was brutal and raw. Adrenaline surged as I fought to protect the woman I loved and the life we were trying to build. It ended with him fleeing into the night, leaving destruction behind but no victory. The police arrived moments later. This time the threat was undeniable. We filed new charges, pushed for restraining orders, and finally found a lawyer willing to help us take stronger action. In the aftermath, as we surveyed the broken door and scattered debris, I looked at Emma, the woman who had been through hell and back, yet still stood with me, unbroken. We had crossed the edge, faced the storm's fiercest blow, and still we were standing. Part 8, Rebuilding from Ruins, the fight for us. The shattered door, the splintered wood lying on the floor, the cold emptiness where safety once lived. All these were painful reminders that the war wasn't over. But in that broken space, Emma and I found something unexpected. The beginning of a new fight. The fight to reclaim what fear had tried to steal. The police were finally serious. The restraining order was granted, and the man who had haunted Emma's every step was forced away by law. But legal papers and court dates felt like small shields against a storm that still raged inside us. We weren't just battling an external enemy anymore. The real battle was within. Battling the distrust that had poisoned us, the shadows of betrayal that lingered in every look, every word. Emma and I began seeing a counselor. At first it felt awkward, like exposing wounds that were too raw to touch, but slowly those sessions became lifelines. We talked about the affair, the lies, the pain that had driven us apart and the fear that threatened to tear us down again. I confessed my anger, my confusion, and the nights I spent wondering if the woman I loved had ever truly been mine. Emma shared her shame, her regrets, and the suffocating guilt that had kept her silent for so long. Together, we confronted the hardest truth, that love alone might not be enough to heal what was broken, but it was a start. We began to rebuild, not the perfect marriage we once dreamed of, but something new, forged in the fires of pain and forgiveness. We set new boundaries, promised honesty even when it hurt, and learned to listen without judgment. Our home, once a battleground, slowly became a refuge again. The cameras stayed, the locks were reinforced, but so was our commitment to each other. There were setbacks, days when the past screamed loudest and hope felt fragile, moments when fear clenched my heart and doubt shadowed Emma's smile. But through it all, we chose to fight, not just for survival, but for a future where trust could grow again, where love could find a way. One evening, as we sat together in the quiet of our living room, Emma reached for my hand. "I don't know what the future holds," she said softly, "but I want to try, with you." I squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of those words, the fragile promise of healing. "We'll take it one day at a time," I replied. "Together." The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges we could not yet see, but for the first time in a long time, I believed in us again. Not because everything was perfect, but because we chose to face the broken pieces, to gather them with care and build something stronger. Our love had been tested by betrayal, shadowed by fear, and scarred by pain. But it was still alive. And as we sat there, hand in hand, I knew that no matter what came next, we would face it, side by side. Because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about fairy tales or happy endings. They're about fighting through the darkness, finding light in each other and refusing to let go.